we're highlighting on how we've confused it. The gospel isn't about whether we are the children or not. We are.
Yes.
I want to say the end goal of the gospel isn't about making us what we're not. It's about us finding the strength to appear as what we are.
That's right.
Because something has come and stood opposed to us.
Yes.
Now, what stood opposed to us? The serpent. Because the serpent was filled with envy towards us. He saw God. Imagine the serpent. Before he was the serpent, it says he was the most beautiful angel there was. Yeah. He was the most glorious, the most beautiful. Ezekiel describes him as the most beautiful tree in all of the garden. Yeah. Right? Clothed in all this awesome thing. He was made even before man. So imagine this guy walking around. He's the most beautiful creature that's ever existed. And then man comes along. And this is what God does when he sees Adam. You are my beloved son. Yeah. In whom I am well pleased. Yeah. And so then the serpent became envious of what God gave to Adam, a man. And so the serpent said, the heck you are. That's where I belong. Right. I'm supposed to be there. I'm the most beautiful angel. I. And so then he stood opposed to man as the children of God. Mm-hmm. And he came to set himself above them as their God. Right? And he brought death into the earth. And now death stands opposed to us, appearing as the children of God. Why do you think the serpent said to Jesus, if you are the Son? Standing opposed to Jesus as the Son of God. At the cross, what does he say? If you are the Son. The whole time they were standing opposed to Jesus as the Son. If you go back and read the letter of Job, and I'm going to get into this to sometime, but you know, the scriptures talk about Satan appearing before God and accusing the brethren night and day.
Right. The opposition.
Well, that verse is described in Job. Yeah. Where it says that Satan appeared before God. And they're talking. That's Satan accusing the brethren. What is Satan saying about the brethren? They're not yours. Look at their death. Look at their body of death. Look at them laboring and toiling. They're not yours. They're mine. Right. They're not yours, God. He's accusing the brethren. What's his accusation? You're not the son. Right. You're not the daughter. You're not the children of God. That's his accusation. He was all the time telling God that. And then he was pointing at our body of death, our nakedness, and then our laboring and toiling to try to clothe ourselves. Right. That's what Satan was doing with God in Job chapter 1 and 2. And then God would say, have you considered my righteous servant Job? You think men aren't mine? You think they don't come from me? Have you considered my righteous servant Job? Now who's the just one really? Jesus is the just one. And so actually Job is a picture of Jesus. You see all the suffering of Job? Who else suffered a whole lot? Jesus. Right. And so God said, have you considered my righteous servant Jesus? He only will believe on you because you've unjustly hedged about this protection around him, and you won't let anything touch him, even though sin has entered the world and is reigning over him. Yeah. What did God say? Behold, he's already in your hand. God, when you say behold, when I say behold, there's Cindy. Did that make Cindy there, or am I acknowledging Cindy's there?
Acknowledging.
Right, so when God said, behold, Job's already in your hand, he wasn't saying, I'm letting you have him. He wasn't saying, go ahead and take him. He was acknowledging that Job was actually already under the reign of the serpent, because the serpent's the prince of this world. Right. What does it say about Jesus? Born of a woman, born under the law. Born in a world where death is reigning. Yes. Have you considered my righteous servant Jesus? And so what happens to Jesus? Satan brings every ounce of calamity against the guy at the cross. Yeah. Every single thing he can bring to him, he does. And what does Jesus do? Jesus, in the face of all that calamity, in the face of the serpent standing against him as the son, telling him he's not the son, him accusing the brethren before God. Right. Jesus, you know what he does? In the face of all that, and the serpent saying, they're not yours. They don't belong to you. They don't believe on you. Jesus says, Father. As a human. Right. Father. And he enters God's rest. Right. And so God could come then Here's a man that believed on God for life instead of the strength of the flesh, even when he was clothed in all death. So God comes and raises him from the dead, and he puts on display, if you want to look at a court of law, he raises Jesus from the dead, and here's God's evidence in the face of the serpent. When the serpent's saying, man's not yours, here's God's evidence, a resurrected human. Boom! You think man's not mine? Who else do you know that has glory and immortality? Sure looks like me to me.
That's right.
Maybe I'm wrong there. But do you think this guy can die again? Is this guy eternal?
Yep.
Okay. Case closed. Man is mine.
Yes.
Good.
Right?
Yes.
Good.
And that's what's actually going on there. And so we have, that's why Satan's called the accuser of the brethren. And when you go and look at it, an accuser would speak of like a prosecuting attorney. Mm-hmm. One leveling charges against another. We've explained the gospel as if God's the prosecuting attorney.
Right.
As if God's the one leveling the charges. But God's the advocate. He's on our side.
Right.
He come and argued our case for us.
Right.
He came and saw that we didn't possess the ability to argue our case. Mm-hmm. He saw we didn't possess the ability to hire an attorney. We couldn't even go study law and defend ourselves.
Right.
You know what he said? I'm going to defend these guys. I'm going to become a human myself. And I'm going to reveal through me becoming a human that human is mine. And they come from me and they are my children. And so that's what the gospel is about. It's about there's something trying to stand against us appearing as the children of God. God says we are, so he wants to strengthen us so we can appear.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's why John would say, beloved, now are we the children of God. But if you go look at that in the Greek, it says, but it's not yet seen what we will be, and the world does not acknowledge us as the children of God. Right. Just like the world didn't acknowledge Jesus.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we know that when we see him, we'll see that we're the same as him.
Yes.
Poof. Now, that's when Paul talked about the manifestation of the sons and daughters of God. All of creation groans in travail, waiting for the manifestation. When Jesus comes, when we're glorified and immortal, we're going to be put on display for all of creation as the sons and daughters of God. We're going to appear in history as what God called us and what we always were. And now we receive strength to appear. And that's when all of creation is going to acknowledge that we are. Because the world does not acknowledge that we're full of glory and honor right now.
Right.
It does not.
Do we get backdated?
Listen, yeah, with perpetuity.
Yeah, right.
Right. There's not going to be any, well, we weren't yet. Do you see how that works? That's what God is busy trying to do. You are mine. That's why, I love what Maurice just brought out there. The funny thing is I'm also like Maurice. My whole life I thought you're not and you become.
Right.
And I studied the gospel and I knew grace for a while before I saw this. But what's funny is, it's like that first moment you hear it and you kind of wrestle, yeah, but all of a sudden your eyes become open and you start seeing everywhere what it says. Yeah. Like God through Isaiah. It doesn't say we weren't cut from the rock. It says we forgot the rock from which we were hewn.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why I enjoyed going through the notes so much.
Yeah.
Tonight, getting ready. It was just opened up and opened up and opened up more and more. It's awesome.
It will.
Good.
Yeah.
It'll hook you up, man.
Yeah, that's right.
You'll start living seeing God as the Good Samaritan, and he always has been, instead of seeing God as the thief.
Right.
That's part of the spirit of faith. Ezekiel talked about God needing to sanctify his name in the hearts of humans. What that means is we believe something about God that wasn't true. Mm. And what we believed about him was working against us being able to trust him with our life.
Right.
And so he had to sanctify his name in our hearts.
Sure.
He had to come and reveal, I'm not the thief that has been stealing from you and killing you and destroying you because you sinned. I am the Good Samaritan. And that's why in John, Jesus said, when they threw the woman caught in adultery at Jesus' feet, and they say, Moses said such should be stoned. They were really saying God demands that she be killed.
Right.
But Jesus is God.
Right.
And Jesus is standing there. You know what Jesus says? He says, I don't condemn you. What? But we thought all these years you've been the one condemning us.
Right.
And then if you keep reading, right after that account, he says, women, where are your accusers? clearly he wasn't the one accusing.
Right.
Where are your accusers? None, Lord. Neither do I condemn you.
Yeah.
Right? Well, right after that, in chapter 9, they find a blind guy. And they want to know who sinned.
Right.
Has got this guy blind. As if God has malpunished them because they're blind. And Jesus said, that ain't got nothing to do with this whole thing. Let me tell you what this has got something to do with. You guys think God is the one that makes people blind because of their sin. I'm God, and watch, I'm about to reveal the glory of God. That word glory means for the truth about a person to be revealed. And so we thought God was the one that gives people sickness and disease and blindness and all these things because of their sin. But God comes and heals those things. And so Jesus said, that doesn't got nothing to do with it. I'm about to heal this person's blindness so that who God really is can be revealed for all you to see. He's not the punisher, he's the healer. He's not the condemner, he's the savior. That's why right after chapter 9, he goes into verse 10 and he says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I am God, and I come to give you life. You see, he explains the whole thing perfectly.
Yes.
And so his name had to be sanctified in our hearts. Because if you see God as the thief, it don't matter how bad you want to trust him, you ain't gonna. You're just not gonna.
Right.
You just can't. It's impossible.
Right.
You can't trust a guy that you think will steal from you. You might want to.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so God comes and sanctify his name. He says, no, I'm the Good Samaritan. You guys have set yourselves up as my enemy. And because you've set yourselves up as my enemy and you've joined yourself to the serpent is actually the thief. And so he's done beating you and butting you and left you in the road for dead. And now here I come. I'm the Good Samaritan. And I'd come and I'd pick you up and I'd fill you with the wine of my spirit and my life.
Yes.
And I'd make a place for you to dwell in my house with me for all eternity. Doesn't he pick the guy up and take him to an inn?
Yes.
And then make a payment for the guy to stay in the inn?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, who's the payment? Jesus. What's the payment that had to be paid? We had to be redeemed. We had to be bought back from death.
Yes.
Not the death God was bringing us, the death the thief brought us.
Right.
And so God come and make a payment so that we could have a place to dwell in his house for all eternity. Because he's the Good Samaritan.
Right.
When you start knowing God's the Good Samaritan, it'll change your life.
Yes, it does.
You'll find all
Yes.
those years where you wanted to live by faith. And you always felt condemned. And you always looked around and thought, well, I'm just a miserable worm. I can never trust God. Why do I do these things? You'll find trust born in you effortlessly. Because you'll have seen God for who he really is. And when you behold God for who he actually is, he's called Father and he gives birth to trust in you. Right? He'll father trust in you.
Good.
Right?
Good.
And that's what the Spirit of faith will do. It will move
You
and
will
hover.
father.
It'll hover over your heart, bringing forth the persuasion that God's the Good Samaritan. It will hover over your body, even should your body go in the grave, incubating you, and it'll raise you up unto glory and immortality.
Yes.
And that's what it says in Genesis. It says, and the Spirit moved upon the face of the deep
Right.
and hovered. When you look at that in the Hebrew, that language, it says like a mother hen would hover over her eggs, incubating them to bring forth life.
Yes.
So it says the Spirit maketh intercession in our hearts with words that can't be uttered.
Right.
It's not talking about praying in tongues there. Listen, I don't have a problem with praying in tongues. I pray with tongues all the time. But that verse ain't talking about praying in tongues.
That's right.
Right? And so when it says that the Spirit maketh intercession in our hearts with words that can't be uttered, the Spirit is hovering in our hearts, hovering there, bringing forth the truth in our hearts with words that aren't spoken out loud, they're spoken inside of our hearts.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so when we see the calamity and the death in this world come against us and try to tell us we're not the children of God because this body of death that we have, the Spirit would intercede in our hearts with words that aren't spoken out loud, but with words inside of our heart. And what the Spirit speaks is He guides us into the person of Jesus as the only truth about our life. The Spirit comes and says, I see that you think you're naked. I see that you see yourself as being separated from God in this life. Let me show you who you are. Bam! And He takes a mirror. He takes Jesus and hands Jesus to you and shows you Jesus as if He just gave you a mirror. And now you no longer see your body of death, but you see yourself wrapped in light and life.
Yes.
And you find something in you that says, Father.
Amen.
Right.
Wow.
That's how the Spirit leads us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It says the Spirit, those who are led by the Spirit of God, do what? Cry out, Daddy.
Abba.
Right? So death is trying to tell us we're not the children of God. If you go read Romans 8, that's where Paul talks about all the calamity that come against him, right? And then he goes in this whole tirade about how nothing can separate me from the love of God. Neither, he goes on and all these things. It talks about the Spirit interceding in our hearts. That's what he's talking about. When the death and the calamity and the sin that's in this world comes knocking at our door, it's trying to tell us you're not the children of God. If you are, prove it. And then the Spirit intercedes in our hearts, not with words that are spoken out loud, but with words inside of our heart, guiding us into the life we see in Jesus as the only truth about our life. Now all of a sudden, we don't see ourselves as naked, but we see ourselves wrapped in light and life.
Yes.
And then we find our hearts saying, Abba. Right? Right in the face of the serpent telling us we're not the children of God, our hearts will say, Abba. We find like the Heisman pose, where the serpent comes and says, you're not the children of God. Look at your body of death. We will, Abba. Bye, Jay.